Today, let's continue with Hostel, Part 3. This film is a departure from the second installment. This time, our story unfolds in a city called Las Vegas. At the beginning of the story, a man appears at a hotel. He's booked a room here, but when he opens the door, he sees a beautiful blonde woman inside. Travis thinks he's accidentally entered the wrong room. However, the woman stops him and explains he's in the right place. They simply haven't checked out yet. She invites Travis to sit and wait inside until they've finished packing up their things. Inside, there's not just the woman, but also her boyfriend, Victor. Seeing Travis alone, Victor warmly offers vodka, suggesting they get acquainted. But Travis is cautious. Before Victor can pour the drink, Travis pulls out an ice-cold beer he bought downstairs. Victor sees the beer and happily accepts it instead. They clink bottles and toast together. To leave the room to Travis, the woman decides she'll take a quick shower first. She leaves the bathroom door open as she undresses, unbothered by Travis's presence. Travis accidentally catches sight of this and feels very embarrassed. Victor laughs it off, saying it's human nature. Our eyes naturally follow movement. He comments that his girlfriend has a hot body, so it's perfectly normal Travis would enjoy the view. Victor then recommends a nightclub filled with beautiful women to Travis. He wants to give Travis a business card, but realizes the woman has it. But when Victor enters the bathroom, he finds the woman collapsed on the floor. Believing she's having a heart attack, he calls loudly for Travis's help. Travis, shocked, hesitates and doesn't move immediately. By the time he slowly reaches the bathroom, Victor also begins to collapse. Now it's clear. Travis had drugged their drinks. After both victims pass out completely, Travis calls his associates to come and pack up the goods. In reality, Travis is a manager at an elite hunting club branch. Ever since his Slovakian bosses established a branch in Las Vegas, Travis has been fishing for victims by pretending to be prey. The scene shifts. Our protagonist, Scott, is saying goodbye to his girlfriend, Amy, because they're about to get married soon. Scott plans to spend 2 days hanging out with his best friend, Carter, before tying the knot. Carter and Amy used to be classmates, and Carter once pursued her. But Amy rejected Carter due to his playboy nature and chose Scott instead. Before leaving, Amy jokingly warns Carter not to take Scott to see strippers. Carter assures her they're just going golfing, so there's nothing to worry about. However, as soon as they drive away, Carter reveals that golfing is just a cover. Their actual destination is Las Vegas. He's also invited 2 other friends who are already waiting there. Meanwhile, Victor and the blonde woman have also been transported to Las Vegas. They wake up trapped in a large iron cage. Suddenly, 2 men arrive and drag away the woman. Clearly, she's about to endure unimaginable torture. Victor screams desperately from the cage, but his cries are useless. By nightfall, Scott and Carter arrive at a hotel in Vegas. Their good friends Mike and Justin are already waiting there. Justin, who has limited mobility, uses a titanium alloy cane. After their reunion, the group quickly dives into gambling and excitement at the casino. Justin proves especially lucky, winning a substantial amount. When boredom sets in, they begin discussing where to go for more excitement. Just then, 2 beautiful women named Kendra and Nikki approach them. They notice the group seems lost and recommend an exciting nightclub nearby, promising a thrilling experience, though they're not sure if tourists can handle it. Curiosity piqued, the 4 friends decide to check it out. In the taxi, the driver remains silent and oddly indifferent. Even stranger, the taxi meter isn't running. Scott assumes the girls must have already paid the driver, so nobody questions it further. The driver soon brings them to a secluded spot. The quiet surroundings feel oddly eerie, nothing like a typical nightclub. Finally, the driver speaks up, telling them this area is known as the Dark Alley, a place where even police hesitate to venture. This thrills the group even more. Arriving at a mysterious door, they knock, and a fierce-looking man asks them what they want. Carter says they were sent by Kendra and Nikki. Hearing this, the man's attitude instantly softens, and he warmly invites them inside. The dark hallway inside is frightening, giving the impression that someone could seize them at any moment. While walking forward, Scott receives a phone call from his fiancée Amy, asking if they've arrived safely and how things are going. Scott reassures her, promising he'll call back once they return to the hotel. After ending the call, Scott realizes his friends have disappeared. Scott searches through the darkness, but all doors are locked. Suddenly, someone grabs him from behind, blindfolds him, and drags him away. He is bound to a wheelchair, pushed into a hidden room, and a tube is roughly forced down his throat. Luckily, it turns out to be just a prank arranged by Carter. Even Kendra and Nikki, who approached them earlier, were part of Carter's surprise plan. Surrounded by partygoers, some clothed, some not, Scott feels uncomfortable. never having attended a party like this before. Kendra reassures him that Carter paid them to show him a good time. She promises she and Nikki will accompany them throughout their stay. Then she takes Scott aside. Meanwhile, Justin, due to his physical limitation, sits drinking alone. A beautiful woman briefly approaches him, but quickly leaves upon noticing his disability. Seeing this, Nikki comforts Justin, offering him special attention and handing him a business card. On the other side, Kendra prepares to become intimate with Scott. But Scott, being principled, remembers he's about to marry Amy and feels guilty about cheating. Having almost broken up with Amy over a previous infidelity, Scott rejects Kendra. Just then, Mike and Carter appear, teasing Scott about his slow progress. Scott, feeling dizzy from alcohol, doesn't bother arguing and steps outside to get fresh air. Kendra follows him discreetly, leaving Mike and Carter alone. Outside, Scott immediately vomits, observed closely by the taxi driver still parked nearby. When Scott returns, he discovers the nightclub door is locked. As he stumbles around, the driver silently approaches him. When morning comes, Scott wakes up safely in his hotel room, unable to remember last night's events. Justin and Carter explain that the taxi driver brought him back safely, showing that fierce-looking people aren't always dangerous, and friendly faces aren't always trustworthy. Recovering, Scott notices Mike is missing. Justin explains Mike left with Nikki last night, probably heading to her home, and his phone is switched off to avoid disturbances. Thus, they don't worry too much. But Mike has actually been captured and taken to the Sinister Club, locked in the same iron cage. Opposite him, Victor still struggles helplessly. Suddenly, two men arrive and drag Mike away, leading him into a room surrounded by glass walls. They quickly strapped Mike firmly onto a chair. At this point, Mike was still desperately begging for mercy. He pleaded, offering money in exchange for his freedom. But the man coldly replied to Mike, "You've already been bought by someone else." As he spoke, the curtains covering the glass walls slowly opened. Outside sat a group of wealthy people. Each person had a computer placed in front of them. Mike's personal details appeared clearly on their screens. Next to this information was a spinning wheel. It allowed the clients to select how Mike would beg for mercy, as well as the method they'd use for his torture. Each option carried different betting odds. But unlike previous versions, a brand new option had been added this time. Clients could now bet against each other, predicting outcomes. One client selected begging by mentioning family, as the way Mike would plead. This had odds of 2-1. Another picked torture involving an electric drill with odds as high as 10-1. People placed bets based on their personal preferences. Just then, an elderly man entered the room. From his bag, he pulled out a mannequin head and placed it on the table. Then he took out a mask. He began carefully tracing lines on Mike's face. At this moment, Mike desperately pleaded once more, saying he had a wife and 2 children at home. His pleading voice was broadcast clearly to the spectators. Those who predicted correctly would double their winnings. Hearing his own voice echoing back at him, Mike started to scream even louder. To silence him, the old man grabbed a billiard ball and stuffed it into Mike's mouth. Next, he picked up an electric drill and moved closer. Seeing the drill approaching, Mike became so terrified he involuntarily sprayed vomit, splattering it all over the old man's face. Enraged, the old man dropped the drill and picked up a surgical knife instead. In the end, using the surgical knife, he slowly sliced Mike's face along the traced lines. He peeled Mike's face off while he was still alive. After completing his gruesome task, the old man turned proudly, showing off his artwork to the clients. Applause filled the room immediately. He then carefully placed Mike's face mask onto the mannequin head. Mike was left in unspeakable agony. Meanwhile, Scott and the others waited at the hotel until noon, but there was still no sign of Mike. Scott had already called Mike countless times, but no one answered. He asked Carter if he had Nikki or Kendra's phone numbers, but Carter explained he'd only just met them briefly, so he didn't know them very well. Suddenly, Justin remembered that last night in the nightclub, Nikki had given him a business card. Thankfully, the card had a detailed address on it. They quickly drove to the location. The moment they got out of the car, a man nearby began observing them suspiciously. Scott called out loudly, but no one responded, so he and Carter decided to enter by climbing through a window. Justin, because of his mobility issues, stayed outside as a lookout. Inside, the 2 men searched carefully, but there was no sign of Mike. While they stood confused, Kendra suddenly burst through the door with another man, pointing guns at Scott and Carter, demanding to know Nikki's whereabouts, accusing them of kidnapping her. Scott immediately explained, saying, "It's a misunderstanding. They had come looking for Mike, who was last seen with Nikki. Since they hadn't heard from either of them, they decided to investigate here. After a tense conversation, Kendra revealed that Nikki never returned home last night, and her phone was unreachable. She had seemingly vanished. In reality, Nikki was inside the torture club. She was about to face her terrible fate. Travis was choosing clothes for her. The man who'd bought Nikki was older, different from others. He didn't use any conventional weapon. Instead, he poured honey all over her body. Before Nikki realized what was happening, he brought out an insect and placed it right before her eyes. Watching Nikki's terrified reaction made him excited, so he opened a jar filled with bugs, pouring them all over her body. These insects weren't ordinary. They would crawl into any opening in the human body, devouring internal organs until their victim died. Terrified, Nikki screamed, opening her mouth wide. Immediately, bugs crawled inside, devouring her from within. This cruel method left no external wounds. Afterward, Travis adjusted her hair neatly, took Mike's phone, snapped a picture of her, and sent it directly to Justin. He included a text message pretending to be from Mike, saying he and Nikki had been sleeping at another hotel all day, apologizing for worrying everyone. He also provided an address, asking them to come find them there. Since Kendra knew the area very well, she recognized the address immediately. The group then drove quickly to the location. Upon arriving, Justin again stayed outside to watch while the other three entered to investigate. In the room, they found Nikki's purse and Mike's watch, alongside a note reading, "We went out drinking. Wait for us here." Suddenly, a man appeared, instantly knocking Carter unconscious. Scott and Kendra realized something was wrong and tried to flee, but it was too late. Another man appeared at the entrance, quickly knocking both unconscious. Outside, Justin saw people carrying bodies from the hotel. He found this suspicious, so he got out of the car to investigate. Suddenly, Travis startled him from behind. Travis said calmly, "A guy named Mike asked me to tell you to meet him at the bar behind the building." Justin, always cautious, took out his phone to double-check. Seeing this, Travis quickly sprayed Justin's eyes with a chemical spray. Justin instinctively lifted his cane and swung it hard at Travis's face. He tried to escape, but he was too slow due to his limited mobility. Travis quickly stood up behind him, knocking Justin unconscious. The four of them were then captured and taken directly to the club, once again locked inside the iron cage. Victor was still there as well, as no one had yet chosen to buy him. Suddenly, two men entered and dragged Justin away. Seeing this, Carter quickly called one of the men over. He removed his shirt, revealing a tattoo of a dog's head. Recognizing Carter as a client, the man immediately unlocked the cage and let him out. Scott, confused and desperate, shouted, "What's going on here?" Carter turned back, casually replying, "This is an elite hunting club, and I'm one of its members." With that, Carter confidently walked away. Carter then headed to the club's main office, where the boss personally greeted him. It turned out that Carter wanted Scott dead and had planned this entire trip, but the boss wasn't pleased with Carter's actions. Because the boss was a man of professional standards, he usually only kidnapped those without close family connections, people whose disappearances wouldn't raise suspicion. This time, Carter had broken this rule by involving Nikki, Mike, and the others. Since they couldn't be released once captured, the boss had no choice but to sell them as well. The boss told Carter the situation was irreversible, and there was only one solution: pay more. Carter knew if he refused, he'd be killed immediately. Reluctantly, he agreed to pay extra and purchased all his friends. Meanwhile, Justin, having just been captured, was brought into the glass room. He was tied to a chair. This time, the method chosen was a woman shooting arrows at him. Clients placed bets on how many arrows it would take to end Justin's life. The woman raised her bow and began shooting. Ultimately, it took 9 arrows to finish Justin off. Watching all of this through the monitor, Carter showed absolutely no sympathy. Back with Scott, he and Victor were still discussing how to escape. Suddenly, 2 men came in and took Scott away, dressing him up in a suit. While being escorted, Scott noticed the club's electronic locks required the tattoo as a key to unlock them. Upon entering the glass room, Scott was shackled to a chair. This event was tonight's main attraction. Carter also appeared, wearing an identical suit. He sarcastically said, "This suit was tailored for your wedding, but now I'll just have to wear it to your funeral." Scott shouted in disbelief, "Why are you doing this? Aren't we friends?" Carter replied calmly, "Because I want your girlfriend. You have everything I desire." He continued, "Justin and Mike disrupted my plan, so I had to kill them as well." Carter then revealed, "Remember your cheating incident? I'm the one who told your girlfriend about it. I thought she'd leave you, but surprisingly, she stayed. This time, I'll finish you for good, and afterward, I'll comfort your grieving fiancé myself." With those words, Carter picked up a chainsaw, ready to strike. However, the boss asked the clients watching from outside for their suggestions. They decided to instruct Travis to free Scott, allowing the two men to have a fair, one-on-one fight to defend their honor and love. Once his handcuffs were removed, Scott quickly grabbed a knife, knocking away Carter's chainsaw. Scott swiftly gained the advantage, knocking Carter down with just 2 punches. He then took the knife and cut off the tattooed skin from Carter's arm, using it to unlock the room's door. Elsewhere, Victor, who had been trapped for a long time, managed to provoke his captor into electrocuting himself. He found keys on the unconscious man, unlocked the cage, and escaped. Victor ran straight to the electrical room, grabbed an axe, and cut off the club's power supply. As his captor searched for him, Victor emerged from the darkness and struck the man with an axe. But in his final moments, the dying man shot Victor, killing him instantly. Scott made his way to the changing room, found a phone, and prepared to call the police. However, he didn't know his exact location, so he asked the police to track the phone's signal. At that moment, Travis arrived looking for Scott. Unable to find him, Travis instead discovered the phone, which was still on a call. He overheard the police confirming they'd tracked the phone's location and were sending units there immediately. Travis immediately informed the boss. The boss ordered Travis to eliminate all remaining hostages, leaving no evidence behind. Scott located Kendra, rescuing her from the cage, intending to escape together. But Travis suddenly appeared and fatally shot Kendra. Meanwhile, the club boss went to his office and activated a timed explosive device, intending to destroy all evidence by blowing up the entire facility. He then exited through the back door and got into his car. Suddenly, Carter appeared from behind, pressing a knife against the boss's throat. Because the boss had released Scott earlier, Carter held a grudge. He brutally stabbed the boss repeatedly inside the car, killing him. Travis, having exhausted his bullets, continued pursuing Scott but was forced into close combat. He grabbed a machete and charged at Scott, who defended himself using Justin's titanium cane as a weapon. Since the cane was made of titanium alloy, the machete couldn't cut through it. After a fierce exchange, Scott knocked the machete out of Travis's hands using the cane. Scott then grabbed the machete, pinned Travis's arm down, and permanently disabled him. In the end, Scott killed Travis with a decisive blow from the cane. Meanwhile, Carter, now without the tattoo required to open the exit doors, was forced to drag the boss's body along to activate the lock. Once outside, he quickly locked the door behind him, ensuring Scott couldn't follow. Thus, Carter successfully escaped. Several days later, Carter pretended to be innocent and visited Scott's home. Scott's fiancée was heartbroken, and she asked Carter to stay for a drink to keep her company. Carter eagerly agreed, thinking everything had worked perfectly. But as the fiancée opened the bottle of wine, her attitude suddenly shifted. To Carter's shock, Scott appeared from behind her. He had somehow survived, though his face was severely disfigured. Together, they took Carter down to the basement, which had been remodeled to resemble the torture club, though without all the elaborate equipment. Ultimately, Scott picked up an ordinary household tool and delivered justice by drilling into Carter's head. With this chilling twist, our story reaches its dramatic end.